like to start off with a thought. Howard, can I get you to read this? Just read it good and loud. I hate to say it. Last time, we need to read loud for the video. Go ahead.
All right, so it says, it's called The Brick. About 10 years ago, a young and very successful executive named Josh was traveling down a Chicago neighborhood street. He was going a bit too fast in his sleek, black, 12-cylinder Jaguar XKE, which was only 2 months old. He was watching for kids darting out from between parked cars and slowed down when he thought he saw something. As his car passed, no child darted out, but a brick sailed out and whoom! It smashed into the Jag's shiny black side door. Screech! Brakes slammed. Gears ground into reverse and tires madly spun the Jaguar back to the spot from where the brick had been thrown. Josh jumped out of the car, grabbed the kid, and pushed him up against the parked car. He shouted at the kid, "What was that all about? Who are you? Just what the heck are you doing?" Building up a head of steam, he went on, "That's my new Jag. That brick you threw is going to cost you a lot of money. Why did you throw it?" "Please, mister, please, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do," pleaded the youngster. "I threw the brick because no one else would stop." Tears were dripping down the boy's chin as he pointed around the parked car. "It's my brother, mister," he said. "He rolled off the curb and fell out of his wheelchair and I can't lift him up." Sobbing, the boy asked the executive, "Would you please help me get him back into his wheelchair? He's hurt and he's too heavy for me." Moved beyond words, the young executive tried desperately to swallow the rapidly swelling lump in his throat. Straining, he lifted the young man back into the wheelchair and took out his handkerchief and wiped the scrapes and cuts, checking to see that everything was going to be okay. He then watched the younger brother push him down the sidewalk toward their home. It was a long walk back to the sleek, black, shiny 12-cylinder Jaguar XKE, a long and slow walk. Josh never did fix the side door of his Jaguar. He kept the dent to remind him not to go through life so fast, that someone has to throw a brick at him to get his attention.
Thank you. You know, I think it's important that we don't go through life so fast that people have to do that to get our attention. Again, a little bit of technical difficulties, but that's okay. I'm passing around the roll for today. I also do something else in my classes that I'm starting a little bit late today. You know how I get to grade you on the quizzes? Would you like to grade the professor on the classes? And what I found is that students, because you guys are the ones who listen to the class, you usually have good ideas on how to make classes better and do better things. So what I do is just a little class evaluation sheet. And if you'd like to sign up, you can actually, these evaluation sheets, you just print them off of either the CD, the website, or Learning Suite. And basically it says, overall class interest, boring to fascinating. You can actually see these. What recommendation, what stood out as good, what seemed unnecessary or unimportant, and what could have been improved. And then a little bit on the tools and the website and things like that. But the goal is if you'll fill out 4 of these, you know how we've got the participation points. We'll give you some points there to make up for the time that you're spending. But if you're interested in doing it, if you sign up, off to the right are just some of the days, like day 8, 9, 10. Today we're on day 6. If you sign up for some of the earlier days, just any 4 will be fine. But I'd like to have like 3 or 4 of these things every day after class when I sit down and I do my kind of mental decomposition of how the class went. If I can get some thoughts and ideas, and then I can kind of make changes for next class. So if you're interested, sign this. It's not a big deal, but it may be helpful. Okay. I wish I could say we have the website up, but let's talk about, today we're going to be talking about cash management. So someone want to define cash management? Is it managing how much cash you have in your wallet? See, I got 20 bucks in my wallet, I'm rich. You know, that's rare. I usually find that if I keep the cash out of my wallet, I don't spend it. When my kids were young, my 3-year-old, she came up to me and she goes, "Dad, if you need money, that's okay. Just ask Mom and she'll get you some." Kind of get a sense that kids have good perspective on how it works. But what is cash management? It's the management of what? Very liquid. So it's not just your cash. What else is it? Checking, savings, things like that. So what we want to know for your personal financial plan is, what is your current cash management framework. What are you earning on your savings? What are you, what are you earning on your checking? And what commission and fees are you paying on any of these vehicles? And then your action plan is which cash management vehicles should you be using and why? So that's kind of our framework today. And so hopefully we'll give you a couple ideas. Couple ideas that I think can, may not be huge, but I think, but I think can be important. So I'll start with an email. This is actually from my nephew who took the class. Not only do I get my kids to take the class, but my nieces and nephews, I tried to get them to take the class as well. He says, I wanted to ask your advice about a semi-short-term investment decision. We have our emergency fund pretty well taken care of in a money market account with Vanguard and have been stuffing our IRAs as best we can year to year. We are now saving for a down payment on a house and want to make sure we are making a sound decision as to where to put these short-term savings so it will be available in 1 to 2 years. But it might get a better return than our emergency fund. I was thinking we could use an insured CD on these savings, but we would like to be able to continue contributing to these savings monthly, so I'm not sure what the best route is. Just wanted to see what you would recommend, if you would recommend a good strategy given the current financial climate. Thanks for your help. So what's the problem? So he's got his emergency fund in place. They're spending money on their IRA. Now they're saving money for a down payment on the house. And so wants to have the money available in 1 to 2 years, but he'd like to be able to continue contributing. Thoughts? Which vehicle should he use? Don't everybody speak at once. Yes, Curtis. Okay, dedicated savings. Okay, anyone use internet banks? Yeah, what kind of, Matt, what kind of return are you getting on those? 0.87. That's over almost 1%. Isn't that amazing? We're talking about 0.87, and that's the high end. Yes, Steve. Okay. Mm-hmm.
When I first deposited, it was like 2.7.
Right.
I think it's down more like 2.8.
Yeah. So why are they giving you that? Why are they giving you that bonus on it? So what do you have to do? Use your debit card 12 times.
So I just go to Taco Bell 12 times. I mean, honestly, that's what I do. Anytime there's like a small debit.
Yeah.
It might be one.
Do you have to do direct deposit too of your?
You don't need to do direct deposit, but I think there might be like one online.
Yeah. So what are they trying to do?
They think they can increase a lot.
Right. Yeah. But there are things with small banks, you can work on that route too. So the key here is what do we do? So let's go into our groups. Let's answer this question. Where do you invest your short-term money? So let's take a couple of minutes. So what have you guys done? Let's start over on this side. Parker, where? Melissa. So, you know, that sounds funny, but we want to find something with an interest rate. We would like a return on our money, not just a return of our money. So, other thoughts? So, it's something with a decent interest rate. Other things?
Put it under your mattress.
Pardon me?
Put it under your mattress.
Put it under your mattress. You know, today's rates, that's a pretty...
It's the safe way.
Yeah. So, there's not a lot of choices. I mean, there are, and maybe there's a few ones. In fact, we'll talk about this. Let me share a case. So you were talking with Kylie, who heard you have taken your personal finance class at the Marriott School. She just got married 2 months ago, and she and her husband Taylor were giving a $3,000 as a wedding present. Kylie and Taylor will both be graduating in 2 years. She wants either to save the money for law school tuition when she graduates, or use it to go on a vacation before law school. Taylor really wants to invest his money in the stock market. He has 2 stocks he really likes. She asked for your advice. What should you tell her? Invest in the stock market. What do you think? Does the use of the money have an impact? It can. Just any place. So does the use, now why in this example, using it for law school tuition, why might that impact the decision? Go ahead, Joni. Or Xu.
Oh, so I just read a case. So it says if you buy the U.S. That there's a certain type of bonds.
A certain type of bonds.
Yeah, then it's federal and state tax.
But, so certain things, for certain types of U.S. savings bonds, if you buy those and you use them for qualified tuition, they're federal and state tax free. Does taxes have an impact on the things that we're doing? Yeah, probably about 5 years ago, I was looking at my returns on my money market fund, and I was really mad because I was making like 0.75, and right now 0.75 would be great. But I said, there's got to be something better than this. And I actually found that there was a tax-free money market muni bonds, and I was making 0.82 on it. So I was actually making more money with the tax-free one than I was, and so that had kind of been inverted there. But be aware, these are important things that go into it. So let's go back into our groups. What are our cash? What are our cash management alternatives? What are the alternatives that we have? And let me just give you an idea, so we could use, I'll put checking, and I'll put saving. But there are other ones out there. So let's talk about some of those that we could use. So we'll spend a couple of minutes in our group. examples. What are some of the cash management alternatives that are out there? So we've got checking, we've got savings, money market accounts. And okay, we've got money market accounts, other things. CDs. Go ahead, other ones? T-bills. Tips. Treasury bills. Okay, we've got savings bonds. And then there's another one. How about money market mutual funds? And on these, you've got two different types. You've got taxable, and you've got tax-free. Any other ones? Those are kind of the main ones. And under savings bonds, I've got EE, and I've got I bonds. Other ones out there. Okay, let me ask another question. What are the questions we should ask about each of these? What are the important areas to our cash management vehicles? And let me just give you an idea. Liquidity is one of it. How liquid is it? What are some other things that are important for us as we evaluate these cash management vehicles? Taxes, penalties for early withdrawal, minimum balance, critical, interest rate. And then what do we mean by risk?
Are they insured?
So insured, so we can say FDIC insured. Anything else?
Minimum.
And we got minimum balance. And we might just put safety here. So let's talk about checking. What kind of interest rates do you make on your checking? 0 to, I think, like 0.55 is the best I've seen. How liquid is it? Very little. Taxes. You pay federal and state tax on both of those. Penalties for early withdrawal. No. Minimum balance. Usually very little. FDIC insured. And safety. Yes. Savings vehicles are probably exactly the same, except for what kind of rates are you getting on your savings? So we've got, someone had up to probably 0.05 to, we saw 0.79, what was that, the highest one we saw here? The rest of it's kind of the same, isn't it? How about a money market account? What's a money market account? So kind of a savings account. Do they offer a little bit higher or a little bit lower rates in savings? So you'd probably get up to 0.06 to 0.85, something like that. Why are they willing to pay you a little bit more? So it's a little bit less liquid. So question, is it FDIC insured? What do you think? So the money market accounts, are they FDIC insured? Okay, money market mutual funds are not. But most of your money markets account, again, they're sold by banks. Most of the rest is pretty similar. How about CDs?
I have a question on money market accounts.
Okay.
Are they less liquid than savings? I have a couple money market accounts, and I don't feel like they're any less liquid than savings.
Yeah, how much more return do we get? They're a little bit less liquid. Yeah, actually, especially if they're not timed, then they're about equally liquid. Generally, the amounts are a little bit more. They might have a higher minimum balance, and they'll probably give you 5 basis points more or something like that. How about CDs? These are a little bit different. Liquidity, how liquid are they? Yeah, it depends. And so now you can get CDs in 1 week or 1 month or 3 months or 1 year or 5 years. What happens if you pull those out before the maturity period? It's an interest penalty. And how much is that interest penalty? Yeah, well, I think it's 3 months, 3 months of interest, depending. And it may vary between instruments. So less liquid. How about rates, interest rates on your CDs? Anyone have CD accounts right now? What kind of rates are you getting on there, Evan?
It's pretty small. It's like 0.075.
0.075. Yeah.
Isn't it 2%?
Pardon me? Yeah, I've seen. I was looking at the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and my charts and my numbers generally come from the Wall Street Journal, and there was one there that was up to about 2%.
That'd be for 5 years.
Yeah, it'd be 5. What, Matt? What year? What period? Yeah.
Mine's only 1 year. That's why the rate's so low.
Yeah. So 1 year, but the point here is basically the same. FDIC insured. Yeah. And taxable at federal and state level. So realize if you're here in Utah and you make that 0.05%, you're paying, and your marginal tax rate's 25%, and your state tax rate's 7%, you're paying a third of that 0.05 to the government. Makes you feel really good too. How about Treasury bills? First of all, Treasury bills, are they FDIC insured? Are they? They're actually not. They're not FDIC insured. But what can the government do? They're backed by the faith and credit of the U.S. government. What can the government do? Print more money. So not FDIC insured, but they're actually backed. Excuse me. No, but they're backed by the faith and credit of the U.S. government. How do you buy these? Can we as individuals go buy these securities? The answer is yes. You go up to treasurydirect.gov and you can just buy them right over there. What's the rates on the T-bills? 1 week was 0.06. 1 month was like 0.08. Why, when we can make 50 basis points, would someone be putting money in T-bills when you're only making 8 basis points? What's the logic behind that? Go ahead, Joni. Well, T-bills, are they taxed?
Yes.
Right. They're taxed. They're taxed at what level? So they're taxed at the federal level. How about state taxes? They're actually state tax free. So you still have to pay federal tax, which is the big hit, but they're state tax free. But what are the minimums on FDIC insured? What's the maximum that they'll insure it up to a certain amount? At $250. And so, the nice thing about Treasury bills for high net worth individuals is, if you're investing in these, you're more concerned of the return of your money than a return on your money. How about money market mutual funds? FDIC insured? No. So you're actually buying a mutual fund. Of course, what's the maturity on most of these investments? 14 days or less. So is there much risk? Most of these are investment grade. Is there much risk of losing your money there? Not necessarily. Notice that we have two types. The taxable. These invest in taxable corporate securities, government securities, things like that. So what's the rates on money market mutual funds? It's still not huge. It's probably 0.1 to 0.6, depending on it. Larry? Matthew?
Talking about taxes, is it about, excuse me, are you paying, is it talking about taxes on the interest? The money you're putting in, you've already
Right.
paid taxes.
So it's taxes on the interest and taxes on capital gains. So a taxable is federal taxable and state taxable. How about the tax-free bonds? Again, probably, depending. Tax-free money market. So what these people are doing is they're investing in municipal securities that probably have a month or less left on their maturities. Federal tax, you have to pay federal taxes on it if they're tax-free. And the answer is yes. Or you don't pay federal taxes, but you would pay state taxes. Now there's an interesting thing here. If you have a muni bond that's from your state, do you have to pay the state taxes on it as well? Troy, you're saying you don't. That's right. So if it's from your state, so is it important sometimes to look at where the assets are located to? And the answer is yeah, because if it's from your state, so if it's a money market mutual fund with assets from your state, it's federal tax-free and it's state tax-free as well. Okay, how about savings bonds, double E savings bond?
Quick
Elliot.
question about that. Has that played like a major factor in your choice of mutual funds?
Actually,
Like where they're located?
I actually tried to get, there's not a lot of mutual funds that tax-free mutual funds that invest in the state of Utah. There was actually one, but they charged a 5.5% front-end load. And the benefit from that is just, it's not worth it to me. I called them up and I said, you know what, the load is crazy. And I said, I'm sorry, if you want to invest it, then you have to pay the load. And I said, okay, I don't want to invest it. I'm not willing to pay a 5.5% load for the privilege of investing in someone else's funds. It would take a lot of taxes or a lot of years to figure that out. So let's talk about savings bonds. For cash management alternatives, is that? It's kind of unique. Tell me a little bit about a savings bond. What's the purpose? Yeah, to encourage people to save for retirement, for education, and things like this. So the government actually made an interesting thing here. FDIC insured? No, but it is supported by the faith in government, faith in backing of the U.S. government. Right now, you're making 0.2%. I bonds, you're making 1.76%. So you've got a vehicle that is yielding 1.76%, and realize this, both of these, the interest rate changes every 6 months. So it used to be the E-bond was 85% of the 5-year Treasury bill. And that's the way they used to work it, and now they have a set rate. Every 6 months, every May and every November, it changes. And we'll actually show you a chart on that in the middle. So is it taxable at the federal? Yes. Taxable at the state for both of these. But there's an interesting thing there. The government is trying to encourage people to use these for education. So if you will use, you put in $1,000 and you use principal and interest for qualified educational expenses, it becomes both, I think it's both federal and state tax-free. I'm not sure. It may not be state, but I know it's federal tax-free. So the downside on these bonds here is they want you to hold them for at least a minimum of 5 years. After 1 year, you can redeem them. But if you redeem before 5 years, there's a 3-month penalty. But for your emergency fund, should you just all have checking, or should you just all have savings, or should you have a number of different assets? Probably a number of different assets. And the reason I like these is because after 12 months, I can redeem at any time. And then what I do is I redeem these bonds when my kids pay tuition. and realize the qualified expenses are very limited. It's basically tuition and fees. But I like the fact that I put the money in now. And when I pay for my kids' tuition, it's tax-free both at the state and the federal level. So one other thing you need to know about these, there's income limits. If you make over roughly $120,000 a year, you can't contribute to these. But our purpose here is really just to give you some ideas of different things you might use in your cash management portfolio. I went on to bankrate.com. And I did some graphs, but let's talk a little bit about cash management. Cash management can help you accomplish the goals that you want. You want to save more money? I find that if I automate that savings, then I can do it. So remember we talked about the first day of class, we talked about my dad putting his airplane on autopilot. So it'd pull us up to 12,000 feet. We'd just go over the Sierra Nevadas. My dad had put it on autopilot. My dad and my mom would just talk. 3 kids in the back would be fighting in the back seat. You guys know what that's like. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to put our financial lives on autopilot? And this is kind of an idea. Want to automate savings? You can do a payroll deduction. So every time a check comes in, they'll take a certain amount and put it into your favorite mutual fund. No, this is just, this is you individually. Right, so the 401k is a different thing. So the other thing you can do, payroll deductions, put money into your 401k every year or every month. You could also have your bank take out a certain amount of money that goes to your own, your own mutual fund there. Want to shorten time working on finances? Quicken, Mint.com, things like that. So let's talk a little bit about an emergency fund. Generally with cash management, we really do need an emergency fund. What's the recommended size of your emergency fund? Right, 3 to 6 months. And usually it would be 3 to 6 months income, but for students who sometimes don't have much income, it's I say income or expenses regardless. But we need we need to put that up. How important is that emergency fund? I had a student come in and talk to me yesterday, and they asked me this question. They said, Brother Sudweeks, I'll be graduating soon. I have a number of debts that I'd like to get paid off soon. What should I do first? Should I just, as soon as I get out, pay off those debts first? What should I do first? How would you have answered that question? So she's got a job. How would you answer?
Number one,
Parker.
Have an emergency fund to last you a couple months because you have a job now. It doesn't mean you have a job tomorrow.
And I know that. I graduated with my MBA, and 8 months later, I was out of a job. So start your emergency fund. I actually told her just a slightly different thing first. I said the first thing is, does your company have a match? And so the question was, is there a match with their 401k? To me, that's free money. So my first priority would get the company match. If they matched 1% up to 3%, then I would put in 3% to get that free money. And then the second thing I said, you know what, I would put as much until you get your emergency fund up to 3 to 6 months. And then after that, then I'd start paying things off. So, and maybe because I lost my job 8 months after I graduated with my MBA that I'm a little concerned, but I think it's a good idea. Mike?
Can you change your answer for people that are single that, the worst thing that can happen is they get out of a job and they have to scramble real quick to get back to their parents' house for a couple months or something, or to a sibling's house before they...
In a case like that, I might make my emergency fund a little bit less. So the emergency fund is that important. And it's amazing, it's nice to have those resources there just in case. So 3 to 6 months income. Question, we've got all of these credit cards. Do we need an emergency fund even when I've got access to the credit card? What do I pay on my credit card? 24% interest. Isn't that interesting? We're making 0.05% on our savings and we're paying 24% on our credit cards. It seems logical. But what happens if they take away those credit cards? And in times of things are tough, people have been known to do that. So here's just some alternatives we're going to talk about. What I want to do is just show you some graphs and some slides. So cash management, from these slides, the key thing here is how do you invest? And so in cases of cash management, just contact a bank or other financial institution. Make sure they're quick and compatible, Quicken Direct Connect, because to me, that's a non-starter. If we can't use Quicken, then it's not worth it to me. Notice here we've got 5 years. Notice 5 years ago we were at 2%, and now we're at 0.5%. Savings are a little bit different. Again, 0.5 to 0.65. Again, bank or other financial institution. You can see these. So I missed that graph. Then you got money market accounts or money market deposit accounts. Again, slightly higher. FDIC insured, all taxable. And again, you can look, these rates I got from Consumer Rates in the Wall Street Journal. So here's money market accounts. And again, roughly about the same as savings. Then we get CDs. Notice 1 month, 10 basis points. A basis point is 1/100%, so 3-month is 25 basis points or 0.25%. 42, 5-year, 1.38. What's inflation right now? Roughly 2%. So this, on a 5-year, you're making 1.38%. Are you doing enough to compensate for inflation? No. So we're in an aberration period here, where we're not even making enough to compensate for inflation. We're losing money on a real basis. Actually, see CD rates over time. You can see a 1-month and a 6-month. Boy, not basically around that 50 basis points. Money market mutual funds, again, different. Rates slightly higher. FDI insured, all taxable. And brokers, and how do you invest here? Mutual fund company set up an account. And on these, be very careful on your fees. You know, make sure that they're low fees. Make sure that there's no front-end load. Make sure there's no penalties, no 12B1 fees, which is a fee to pay this to someone else. So so a 12B1 fee is a fee to allow you're paying the company to market their fund to somebody else. Does that make a lot of sense? Shouldn't the company pay its own marketing expenses? So 12B1 fees, I don't like those either. We talked about money market mutual funds. They can be tax-free. So if it just invests in government securities, the interest, now realize it's the interest that's tax-free, not capital gains. So if it invests only in government securities, the interest is state tax-free. If it invests only in municipal securities, the interest is federal tax-free. And if it invests in municipal securities from your state, it can be both federal and state tax-free. And that's for states that have.
What's the difference between government and municipal securities?
Okay, municipal are public sector companies or enterprises.
Sorry if this is a dumb question, but so say you are moving to a new state and then you invest in your state's money
Funds, right.
and then your job asks you to move. Like, well,
Right.
how does that?
So
Is that like a?
So we will report for 2012. We're in 2013 now. We're reporting for 2012. So if we lived a majority of our time in that state, then we would get that state benefit. Now, there's a lot of states that do not have state taxes, state income taxes, such as Washington, Texas, Florida. And what do we find now with interesting article in the Wall Street Journal today? And what's happening in California? The state taxes are doing what? Going up. And what happened to the group? What team was it? They got sold to the Kings got sold. Isn't it interesting? And where do all the basketball players who are making $5 to $7 million a year, do they want to be in California where they're taxed at the highest rate, nearly 40%? No, and the answer is no. Yes?
Bill Mickelson just came under a lot of fire for talking about his effective tax rate, which is now over 60%.
60%.
5 million earnings.
So the amount that the government taxes has no impact on us. What happened in France? Gerard, where did he move? I thought he moved to Belgium, but that's all right. But people will move. People are rational people. We will move where our tax rate's the less. The goal is to maximize our individual incomes so we can use our resources for ourselves and our families. It's not a zero-sum game. Okay, then we've got Treasury bills. Look at these huge Treasury bill rates. 10-year, 1.87%. So guaranteed, here's just some views. A 3-month CD versus a 91-day T-bill auction. 1-year CD versus Treasury, constant maturity. So again, you have to ask, why are people investing in the Treasury securities? And I think to a large degree, it's the amounts there. Now, here's the ones that not too many people talk about, it, which are the savings bond. So 5 years, you've got to hold them at least a year. There was a time about 8 years ago when the government was trying to encourage people to invest in savings bonds. And they actually made this deal that you could buy the savings bonds with your credit cards. And so you had a number of people, actually myself included. We were taking my whole family to Hawaii, and I needed some extra miles to take them between islands. You know, you have 7 kids, so there's 9 of us, plus 2 grandparents. It was a little bit on the expensive side, and so I did that. But I wasn't the smart one. There's a number of people who had credit cards that rebated 2%, and the interest rate they were making was like 4%. So these people would buy it with their credit card, get the 2%, and then redeem them. Needless to say, after a while, all the people would redeem them before a year, and the government came back and said, nah, we can't do that. But state and local income tax exempt, issued at their face value, interest tax-free if spent on eligible college tuition. And again, it's a very, very narrow things of what you can use. But you can actually take a look over the last 8 years, 10 years. So now we're at 0.2%. And so you basically have to hold it they want 5 years, but at least a year. And then here's the one that I liked, which is the inflation linked. Now we're making 1.76%. So if we have a diversified portfolio, we have some savings and we have some checking, you could actually throw a little bit of this in as well. And even if you only wanted to hold it for a year, you hold it for a year, cash it in, you get a 3-month penalty, you're still making 0.8, 0.9%. Or in this case here. But realize there are chances that there was a period here that the interest rate was 0. But so the risk here is interest rates change. But the nice thing about that, we're still making 1.76%. And so the challenge is how do we be wise in the things that we do? Realize too that your MAGI, your modified adjusted gross income, the government's trying to ensure that these are for basically middle-income people. So if you make over these limits, you can't invest. But still, there's some good things. So, but the question is, how do we compare these different alternatives? We've given you dozen different cash management alternatives. What are the things, how do we compare these to make sure we're getting the best deal? I mean, our goal here is to have you guys, to give you alternatives, and then you guys can make the best decision. First of all, is cash management a big deal? Well, wait a second, look at my interest rates, 0.05%. Should I spend a lot of time on it when I'm only making 0.15, 0.25? What do you think?
I mean, balance it with what you've got in it. Big deals.
Yeah.
Things that are big deals, spend more time on.
Right.
Things that are not as big.
Right. But my point of sharing this is, even if we can just get 20 basis points more, instead of 0.05, maybe we can get 0.3. But 20 basis points more over the life of our emergency fund and over 40 or 60 years can make a difference over time. I find that if we can be aware of the small things, the big things will take care of themselves. It's kind of like in the scriptures. Read your scriptures, say your prayers, attend your meeting. Those are the small things. Watch your budget, manage your cash well, watch your investments. But in the end, I think it's the big things the small things become the big things. So let's talk about how do you compare different cash management alternatives? Because we've got to be able to come up with things that we can use in this class to help us to compare one versus the other. So let's take a couple of minutes, do that. So let me just give you an example. One thing we could compare interest rates.
So you mentioned on the savings
It will float too.
But CDs won't.
CDs won't. So what are some things we need to do to compare our different alternatives? What are some things that are important to us? So one is comparable interest rates. And which interest rates should we use? And which one is that? APY. What's the difference between your interest rate and APY? Yeah, the impact of compounding. So compare across average percentage yield. What do we look at when we compare? You know, which is kind of interesting. We're looking at our savings vehicles. We look at APY. Debt vehicles, what do we look at? APR. But does APR take into account compounding? It doesn't. Okay, what else when we're comparing cash management alternatives? What else should we look into? Liquidity? Yeah, you can. That's not what I was looking for. Go ahead, Evan.
Well, one thing that's important to me is if I can get to my money easily, so when I know we just talked about liquidity, but if I can get to my money easily, I'll be much quicker to spend it.
Okay.
But if I take money like that somebody has given me and put it in like a CD and say like I'm not allowed to touch that for 5 years, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind.
Okay.
So it's just growing.
So liquidity.
Remember that I have it.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Now, let's say you've got a CD. You'd like to get a little bit longer return, but you don't want to put all that together. Anyone heard what's called a CD ladder? You want a 6-month return, but you need some money every month. You could do a 6-month here, and a month later you do another 6-month, and a month later you do another 6-month. So you're laddering your CDs to a longer period to give you a little bit higher return, and that you still have money coming in every month. I mean, you could do things like that. So liquidity is a good one. I step back, yes?
I feel like the next one after interest rates is probably taxes, because depending on how much money you make,
Taxes?
you probably save more in taxes than your.
Right, so are we concerned about the interest rate, or are we concerned about our after-tax return? And so do you want, now do you know why I had you do your marginal and your average tax rate? So you can actually calculate. So we need to calculate our taxes. What else is important? It's not only after tax, it's also after inflation. And that's important too. So let's kind of go through and we'll do a couple. So just where do you get information? Graphs, interest rate data. I picked up a lot of this stuff off the Wall Street Journal. Savings bonds, you go to treasurydirect.gov. You can go to a number of financial websites as well. So comparing cash management alternatives. Number one, comparable rates. APY is similar to the APR, but it takes into account the effect of compounding. APY equals 1 plus the APR divided by the periods to the number of periods minus 1. So if you go up there and you say, well, you know, we pay it twice a year, your interest rate is 0.5, your APY is 0.55. That APY is what you want to use. Number two, after-tax returns. And so some of these vehicles have tax benefits. So anything that has a tax benefit, you need to calculate what's called the equivalent taxable yield. Now, the equivalent taxable yield is the yield on a fully taxable corporate bond that would give me the same after-tax yield as my tax-advantaged security. So calculate your after-tax returns. Your after-tax return equals your taxable return times 1 minus your tax rate. And your tax rate is your marginal federal tax rate, marginal state tax rate. If you're in Utah, what's your marginal state tax rate? Roughly, it's about 7%. How about California? Yeah, it was actually 10% before I left. It's probably up to 13 now. Yeah, so 13.5%. Now, if you work in a state such as New York City, they also have a city tax rate. So you can see some of these people have very high tax rates. So what your after-tax return is your taxable return times 1 minus your tax rate. So when we calculate your equivalent taxable yield, here's what we do. First of all, we calculate our return after tax. Let's say you have an I bond that's yielding 1.76%. And you're going to use it for education expenses. So what's your after-tax return on that I bond? 1.76. Let's say you live in California. You are in the 25% tax bracket. Let's say you're in the 30% tax bracket, and you live in California, and your tax is 13.8%. So what's your overall tax rate in California? So 30% plus 13 point, so roughly 43%. So then it'd be 1.76 divided by 1 minus whatever your marginal tax rate is. So if you're a high tax rate individual, do you like I bonds? Probably, but the downside is you can't. They have tax limits on it. Evan.
Could you clarify the personal income tax? How is that different from being taxed federally or by the state?
Okay, so first of all, everyone pays taxes here. We pay federal income tax. Now, certain states, instead of having income tax, they have higher business taxes and other taxes there. So like Texas has no income tax. Florida has no income tax. Alaska actually pays you to live in Alaska from the oil fund. Washington has no state tax. And so do you think companies recognize that? Is it any wonder that people like Microsoft have moved up to Washington and other Boeing and other places like that? Companies are rational people. They'll go where they can get the highest after-tax return. So, but it's important that we understand the returns after tax for fully taxable assets, equivalent taxable yield for tax-advantaged assets. And so what I can say here's my return, 1.76 if my tax rate is 35%. You know, it's basically equivalent to about 4%. So we can calculate these. And then once we have these statistics, then we can make the decisions as to which is the best. Okay, returns after inflation. Remember our formula? The real return is 1 plus our nominal return divided by 1 plus inflation minus 1. That's the correct way we use it. That's the CFP way of doing it. So first of all, here's the question. Do we want to take out, we want to calculate our after-tax, after-inflation return. Do we take out inflation first and then take out taxes, or do we take out taxes first and then take out inflation? Which would we prefer to do? Which would we prefer to do? Take out inflation first and then take out our taxes. What happens if we do that? We go to jail. That's right. So before calculating after-tax, after-inflation returns, your nominal return would be your after-tax return. Matt? What do you think it's right now? It's negative even before taking out our taxes. It's really negative after taxes. So just for fun, let's do a quick problem. So grab your calculators. So we'll just use a 1 year. Let's see what our after tax, after inflation return. So what is a 1 year Treasury bill yielding? How many basis points? 0.8. Okay, so we're going to say your 1 year T-bill, 0.8%. What's inflation? So we just say inflation, 2%. This is our hypothetical person. What's their marginal tax rate? So we say, let's say 25% federal. What state do they live in? Should we have them live in California? Let's have them live in California, and so they're paying, let's just say 14% there. So what is the after-tax, after-inflation return on this hypothetical person? So our formula is, so your return after tax equals return before tax 1 minus. This will make you guys feel really good. If you've got the answer, raise your hand. A few people, give us a little more time. Good. Question? Okay, you got the answer. Let's give us 30 more seconds. Okay, would someone like to take me through it? First of all, how do I calculate my return after tax? So here's the formula. So what did you get for your return after tax? So 80 basis point, 0.8% times 1 minus 0.39. So what is your return after tax? Pardon me? So 0.488%. Okay? Did we get that? So it would be 0.8 times 1 minus 25.25 plus 1.4. And that gives us 0.488. I'm assuming that's right. I don't have my calculator here. Is that right? Okay. What is your return after tax after inflation? So it would be 1 plus 0.00488, 1 plus 0.02. And what did you get? Negative 1.5 minus 1.5%. Makes you feel really good, doesn't it? You're actually going backwards. Steve.
This brings me to, I mean, just like we had a cool conversation up here about how, like, when we look at this right now, the times we're living in, think about what it takes to make $1 on $100. You know, like at a 1% rate, you save $100 for an entire year to make $1. So it just puts emphasis on our budget, and saving $1 is maybe so much easier. Like we said, like on a tube of toothpaste, and we make such a fuss about savings, but how quickly can you be making these dollars in another way?
Right.
And it's just, so I mean, that's almost where, like, I want to, when we talk about time allocation, I want to allocate my time towards saving dollars. It's almost like credits versus deductions.
Yeah.
My credits in my life right now are my savings. Like,
and the key is we need to do both.
Yeah. Well, of course, but I'm just saying it just shows you the contrast right now.
So, kind of in summary, before we get into a few problems. Let's see. Your cash managed assets depends on 5 different things. Number one, your goals and your risk tolerance. What do you need the fund money for? The type of assets preferred. Notice it depends on your tax situation. It can also depend on the location of the financial assets. And finally, your use of the funds. So realize that when we talk about cash management, there's a lot of pieces that go into the puzzle that's important for us to understand. Okay, let's do let's do a couple of case studies. 46. Bill's in the 15% federal, state 7% state. Susie's in the 35% federal, 7% state. They're both from Utah. They're considering purchasing one of the following bonds. Calculate the after-tax return for each of the bonds for Bill and Susie. Which bond should Bill purchase and which bond should Susie purchase? So considering I have about 6 minutes left, let's kind of go through that framework quickly. So taxable return times 1 minus your tax rate. So the first bond, corporate bond, is 6.5%. What kind of a return after taxes for Bill? So what's his marginal federal rate and state? 22%. So it's 5.07. How about the muni bond? Return on the muni bond? So muni, is it federal or state tax free? Federal. So what's he paying taxes on? Just the state. How about the Treasury bill? Treasury bill is what tax free? State tax free. So notice that the after-tax return is important for him to understand. Let's go to Susie, who's in a higher tax bracket. Corporate bond, what's her return after tax? So she's 35% federal, 7% state. Yeah. Now the corporate bond, will the answer be the same for both Bill and Susie? Will the corporate bond after-tax return be the same for both Bill and Susie? Excuse me, will the muni bond be the same for both? And that's right. Because they're eliminating just federal taxes. Again, same that 4.42. So isn't it interesting, your tax rate in this situation has an impact on which bonds that they should take. So Bill, which bond should he take? Corporate. How about for Susie? Municipal bond. Okay. Now we've got Kylie and Taylor, earlier case study. $3,000 wedding gift that they're trying to decide what to do. And you can see 4.8%. You can see this was like 4 or 5 years ago. But let's say, so they've got the choice. They can do an I bond. Number one, what's the equivalent taxable yield? So the equivalent taxable yield is the yield on equivalent fully taxable security. If they use to pay for law school tuition, is that a qualified educational expense? The answer is yes. So that would be both state and federal tax-free. Or if they were going to save it for a family vacation. If it's a family vacation, is it federal tax-free? No. Is it state tax-free? Yes. So let's calculate that.
Wait, can you explain that? Family vacation, state tax-free?
Right. So government securities are state tax-free. Right, just by law. And municipal securities are generally federal tax-free. And so because it's an I bond, it's a government security, and so it's automatically federal tax-free. So remember the equivalent taxable yield. So if they use it to pay for law school tuition, what's their after-tax return? $4.8%, because that's what it is. And so you divide that 4.8% divided by 1 minus 0.25 plus 0.07. Looking at our time, I'm going to have to move ahead on this. So here's our before tax. So it's federal and tax-free. The yield would be the tax-free return divided by 1 minus the tax rate. So 4.8%, which is the after-tax tax-free return. Or basically to get the same yield on a fully taxable bond, you'd have to earn 7.06%. Now what if they decide to use the money for education? For a vacation? Now it's only state tax-free. The equivalent taxable yield is now 5.29. Isn't it interesting? The use of the funds has an impact. As kind of my parting thought today, I'd like to share a thought from Jonathan Clements, one of my favorite writers. He's no longer writing for the Wall Street Journal, but he's very good. And he gives you some tricks to soften the pain of saving. And as Steve there said, it's really critical that we save. So it's critical that we save. It's critical to be wise. He says, you want to get rich? Try making yourself feel poor. In managing money, we make all kinds of behavioral mistakes. We are overly confident in our investment abilities despite abundant evidence of our incompetence. We fret too much over each investment instead of focus on our entire portfolio. Need to stock away more money? Below are 9 ways to cajole yourself into saving. I readily admit I use many of these tricks myself. Number 1, every year your top financial priority should be fully funding your employer's 401k retirement plans. The important thing there is funding that first, and then the second thing is getting your match. 2, you can also compare yourself to save by arranging to invest automatically in your favorite mutual funds. With these plans, your monthly $20, $50, or $100 fund investment is deducted directly from your bank account. Again, putting things on automatic pilot. Number 3, to sneak in a little extra savings, try rounding up your required monthly mortgage check to the nearest 100. You got to write the check anyway. So instead of $1,432, write it up to $1,500. Number 4, make it a rule to save any money you receive that's out of the ordinary, such as tax refunds, overtime pay, year-end bonuses. 5, you may get a windfall in the form of an annual salary increase. If you aren't currently saving enough, force yourself to sock away every part of the increase. Maybe the goal is we're going to save 60% or 70% of the increase. Number 6, want to save a little more this month? As soon as you get your paycheck, decide how much you will salt away, then immediately send off the money to one of your favorite mutual funds. Does that sound like paying yourself first? Paying yourself second? It says the danger, of course, is that you don't trim your spending and instead start pulling up the credit card charges. What to do? You could use a debit card instead. And then here's this last one. He says you might consider using the shelf register self-deception. For instance, my checking account earns interest every month. I get reimbursed for the fees charged on my cash machine withdrawals, and I receive a small amount of cash back on debit card transactions. When I balance my checkbook, I don't include these, instead leaving them as part of my account's invisible balance. Lots of different ways to save. Cash management, even though it's a small thing, it can make a big deal in the end. Again, as we said, the small things in the end are big things. Thank you.